Hey folks, David Stewart here. Let's get to some more comments. Today I'm going to try to get to the comments on my Ferdinand review, which talked about some of the political messages in it, pacifism, anti-meat, that sort of stuff, and some of the hazards with having anthropomorphic animals speak about animal rights and things like that, and how that can be a little bit manipulative, especially to kids who are not really aware of the differences between fantasy and reality when it comes to characters and their assigned form. They come in the form of an animal. So here we go. Let's start with Ferdinand, the soy boy bull. Okay. The original story is a nice tale for kids about a mentally challenged bull. No pacifist message, just a bit autistic bull on his own fairyland. No clue about the world around him. The original is nice. The remake is propaganda. Now, I am going to talk about this word here, autistic. Guys, autistic does not mean retarded. Autism is something very specific. At least it was something very specific. Now there's a lot of people who get qualified in special ed under autism that probably don't really fit the bill, but that's a different discussion. Calling things autistic is not the same as calling it retarded, and that is in fact a retarded thing to do. It means that you don't know anything about what autism is. And I don't know if this bull was necessarily mentally challenged, but I thought the original was a bit pacifist, but not necessarily the Disney one, which doesn't really have any specific message. But my rating is really on this particular movie. It doesn't really matter what inspired the movie. What matters is kind of what's present in the movie to me. So when the book was released, it was also labeled as being pacifist propaganda. Okay, cool. And was likewise banned in nationalist Spain and Nazi Germany. Okay, interesting. That's really an interesting tidbit. That you mistakenly thought it as a retard speaks volumes of the state of pacifism. Fun fact, I've always thought of myself as a pacifist, but that was the pact of non-aggression sense, not the lay down and get yourself killed doctrine that is being pushed so you can get replaced by hordes of savages docile to state power. Wow. So there's a huge difference between pacifism and non-aggression. Non-aggression is actually the principle through which most people act in their everyday lives, at least the way they interact with other human beings. Non-aggression is that you don't utilize force against another person unless they are using force on you in a number of different ways. If somebody's threatening to use force, that's the same as using force, because if you're robbing somebody with a gun, you're saying it's either your money or your life and your money, right? So you can respond to that with force. That's the idea of the non-aggression or non-aggression principle, NAP, which is sort of the guiding principle of most libertarian philosophies nowadays. It's different from pacifism. Pacifism is you are not going to essentially defend yourself. You're not going to use force even when force is used on you. Now, unfortunately, lots of people are forced to be pacifists with lots of things, including government use of force, right? And that's not because people want to be pacifists. It's because if you were to use force, if the police officer comes to arrest you and you use force to resist arrest, what ends up happening as a result of that is much worse than if you risk arrest and going to trial and those sorts of things. So you end up, in some cases, being a pacifist because the escalation of the conflict that you're going to get yourself involved with is much worse than what would normally be your right, which is to defend yourself with force. You can also think of this as turnabout as fair play. If somebody is using force on you, whatever tactics a person is using on you in a hostile sort of way, they are putting their moral stamp of approval on the use of those tactics on themselves. Right? So if somebody hits you, they're basically saying it's morally okay to hit, which means when you hit them back, you're merely ascribing to their ethical system. You're not breaking any kind of rules of ethics because obviously the other person has no objection to it or they wouldn't do it to you. That's a really easy way to think about that sort of thing. Same thing if somebody comes up and insults you. This is something that I get with comments on the channel all the time. They're like, you straight up insulted this person and attacked them. It's like, well, they started by doing that. So whatever they initiate, they're saying that's okay. So I'm just going to do that to them. It's kind of like the thing, like, when you first meet somebody, you treat them with dignity and respect. And then after that, you treat them exactly how they treat you, because that is them expressing their moral system. And if somebody says that they have a moral system that's different than what they do, then they are, and especially they're ascribing to a very specific kind of moral system, which is that it's okay to lie and be a hypocrite. So no, I'm not being a hypocrite when I cast somebody down for insulting me, or I give them back even worse than what they gave me. No, turnabout's fair play, and I'm merely going with their ethical system that they're proclaiming is right. So there's an interesting point for you. And yeah, don't be harmless, Let's see, this is more of this stuff. When I was a kid, plenty of cartoons made me cringe to the point of simply having me hate them. So you can't cringe at a kid's movie as an argument, because even kids get annoyed by things playing silly. Yeah, that's true. Even kids can be annoyed by something. I think we typically think of characters for kids like it's okay for them to be more annoying, like kids are less annoyed by like zany antics, but kids can be annoyed by stuff as well. I have to go by my reaction though, because I can't imagine. I can remember being 6, but I can't imagine being a 6-year-old again and looking at something like that and finding it amusing. So I just have to go with how I feel. And yeah, they were really cringy and annoying characters. Yeah, the film is based off the book, The Story of Ferdinand. I think there was also a Disney cartoon. It talks about a bull who would rather smell flowers than fight in the bullfights. It was often criticized as being a pacifist book. Okay, yeah, that's... However, many people criticized the book for just about anything and extrapolated everything imaginable from it. Notice me? Yes. I wouldn't label those racial stereotypes. Spanish is not a race, neither is German. Now, this is an interesting point, and I responded with a rhetorical question: is Hispanic a race? Because Hispanic simply means Spanish. It's a really bad word for what people in America call anyone south of Mexico and south is just Hispanic. Even it's like, oh, you're from Brazil, you must be Hispanic. It's like Hispanic means Spanish, but people from Brazil speak Portuguese. And, they might have Portuguese blood, which is not Spanish. It's Iberian, but not Spanish, right? But here's the thing. This is a really good example of talking through semantics, or arguing, what I call arguing through semantics. You're not actually arguing with anything negative I had to say about the German horse stereotypes. Merely that the word racist, because there's no other word besides racist. I can't say you're an ethnicist, right? We don't really use that word. It's racist, meaning it's negative against some group of people. Now you can think of it like that. And there's lots of different, definitions of race. So you're kind of arguing through semantics, but the point is this a dumb stereotype of Germans? And is it unfair to German people? And does it implant in children the idea that Germans are vain, obsessed, effeminate, dancing horses or something, right? That's the worry about racial stereotypes or any kind of ethnic stereotype, is that if you're giving them, you're subjecting them constantly to children, then they're going to think that Chinese people have it's like the old Warner Brothers cartoons. You go back and look at them, and there's a lot of racial and ethnic stereotypes in them, and I don't think they're evil for having those because of the time that they were made. But if you're a kid and you start to that's the only view of Chinese people you see, is that they have big buck teeth, like they put in the Elmer Fudd cartoons, then you're not really getting an accurate view of a people, and that's a big part of my sort of objection to it, is you're not accurately viewing a group of human beings. But also my other point is that it's Germans are white people, so it's kind of free reign, right? Any group that's quote white, that's European, you can just sort of make fun of and have be as villainous as you want, or as effeminate as you want, or have whatever sort of negativity associated with it. Make fun of them as much as you want. But you couldn't do the same thing for a group of Africans, right? You couldn't have a group of Africans jumping around checking spears, spear checking horses, black horses or something. People would obviously understand that that's offensive, or that of course it doesn't portray all black people, right? Although you do, maybe the hedgehogs might have been a black stereotype. I don't know. That's the caution of stereotypes. And I'm not trying to sound like some kind of social justice warrior with that. It's just how it is. And I just think it's kind of, everybody gets a free pass to make fun of white people, but no one else. The stereotype of the effeminate German man is news to me. It's a thing in America. Latino's not a race. It's technically not. It's actually, so I don't know. I don't want to dig into it, but most people who are Hispanic have a mixture of ancestry, European and Native. And so there's other words that, like mestizo, that they use to describe that. But you do have a group here in the United States called La Raza, that's the race of Mexico. And so different groups can consider themselves a race as small as they want to. So it's really just kind of a question of the semantics. And I'm all for arguing semantics because you want to be clear with language. But the point is that they were having German stereotypes that were kind of dumb. Yeah, let's see here. I'm from Brazil. Am I Hispanic Latino? It's like not Hispanic, obviously. Now you're going to tell us there's no such thing as dog breeds. Neanderthals weren't another race, they were another species. There are far greater differences between the human races than melanin concentration, skull shape, bone density, vulnerability to specific disease. That's why Europeans imported African slaves to the United States, as they were like hardier than the Irish slaves that they were bringing over prior to that. So you brought over Irishmen. The Irishmen were all dying. Brought over Africans, and they seem to do pretty well in like the humid American Southeast. So there you go. Common genetic mutation, etc. Sickle cell disease is very common in blacks because the mutation also provides protection from malaria. That is a very interesting fact, and I've heard of that. I know it's uncomfortable to talk about race, but discomfort should not triumph over truth. Evolving in different pockets of the world over 50,000 years has generated a fair amount of variation between the human races. That's true. And the other thing is, a lot of the people trying to avoid talking about race in general, if you don't move from the general to the specific, right? So if you're saying, hey, there's a lot of the sickle cell trait that's present in sub-Saharan African populations, right? I'm being really specific there. Sub-Saharan blacks, right? That doesn't mean that you have sickle cell if you're a black individual, nor does any other sort of noticing of a racial trend in any country. It's like, there's a major incarceration problem with African Americans. That doesn't mean if you're black and in America you've been to jail, right? Because you can't ascribe to the individual the traits of the group. And that's a problem that a lot of people have, I guess maybe conceptually. I just notice it a lot, and it's not on any particular given side even of the political spectrum. It's like you tend to say, this group is like this, therefore this individual's like this. This, or the other one is an individual's like this, and that is indicative of the group. So this man over here is a real creep, therefore men are creeps. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. The group doesn't have the attributes of the individual either. So it is, cultural stereotypes, whatever you want to call it. We don't have a word for things other than racist. So we'll use racist. Racist doesn't really mean anything anymore anyway. We've kind of used it to the point where it just doesn't mean nothing. I haven't heard that one before. Effeminate German. Spanish people tend to be an open season for mockery in some ways, like all European people. Comes to the territory. And this is something I noticed about Spaniards, is that if you're from like Andalusia, you get made fun of a lot by people in like northern Iberia. That it's like they view Andalusians as like weird, effeminate gay men or something. I don't know. But I remember when I used to play at this Spanish restaurant, and the guy who owned it, who we called Paco, who was in the Spanish Navy. He was like a cook in the Spanish Navy and decided to open restaurants. Really interesting guy. He would tell us all these jokes from Spain that didn't make any sense because we weren't from Spain, right? It's like, so we have a guy from the south and a guy from the north, and it's like the guy from the south ends up being gay, and like that's the joke. And he's like you'd get it if you were from Barcelona or something. I'm like, but I'm not, so I don't look at all these different regions of Spain as being like particularly housing one group of people. But it'd be like if you're an American, we make fun of New Yorkers or Boston people. You could do that, but I'm not familiar enough with the idioms of Spain to like understand most of those jokes. But it felt like Andalusians were basically like open season on making fun of them. If you know any female U.S. soldiers who've been stationed in Germany, ask them. Not many of them date Germans from what I've seen, but that's just me, and I haven't been in units with a lot of females, so my sample's probably skewed. The circumcision thing actually is a thing with U.S. women, in spite of what they want you to think. What is this? I have no idea what you're talking about with this. I guess American women wanting to discriminate on the basis of circumcision, which is weird. Okay, that might be a thing, but that doesn't mean it's a good thing. I find it fascinating that people need to hide the truth of how meat is produced from kids, all the while serving meat to them is no problem. So the thing is, presenting a talking cow is not presenting how meat is made, because cows do not talk and have human feelings and act human, right? And have human cognition and fear being meat. They're created for meat, right? So you don't have to get into the gory details, but how is hiding information empowering kids to make their own choices? Well, and I made the point in the comment, right? It's just like if you're going to talk to them about meat, let's talk about it without having, Guapo the talking bull be turned into hamburgers at the slaughterhouse. But I don't want to eat Guapo. Animals are not rocks or just machines. Hell, humans are animals, yes. Anthropomorphizing other animals actually makes sense to a large degree because, most obviously, if these are your characters, which can be fun in their own right, but it also helps people view the animals as sentient, emotional creatures. That's the problem, which a lot of people have a hard time doing otherwise, even though it's logically and scientifically the most sound position. Not necessarily true, I disagree, due to both biological structures, evolutionary similarity to ourselves, and behavioral observations. They have behavior, but you can't extrapolate that they have the same emotions as us because they cannot communicate those. Whenever we look at actions of animals, we're always viewing it through an anthropomorphic lens. We're always viewing it through the lens of man. So when a dog turns its eyebrow sideways and looks at us and we're like, oh, the dog looks sad, right? There's nothing to say that dog gives that expression to other dogs and dogs say, oh, that dog's sad, and think that we're impressing upon that because that's a human sort of facial expression. There might be some connection there, but we don't know exactly what it means. Dogs usually look sad when they're begging and they want something. So that could mean I want something. It could mean, not just sad, but I'm sad that I don't have something. Give it to me. This is so, or you train a dog to act that way too. Dogs respond to lots of different stimulus, and if every time they sit down and look sad and whine, they get something from you, they're just going to end up doing that behavior. And then it's just another kind of Pavlovian behavior set, rather than something that's really indicative of some deeper emotional state. You're always impressing it upon there because they can't speak for themselves. You don't have the strong evidence. And when you look at, and this is just an aside, but when you look at people that go out and study chimps, there's always you're always pasting human emotions on them rather than sort of looking at their behavior as a piece of functional set in their biological lives. And I tend to be a functional behaviorist, and humans can have their behavior modified too, by the way. We are animals. But no, I don't think that that's a sound scientific sort of view. Sure, when we get down to insects, these similarities break down quite a bit, but with mammals especially, it is quite pronounced. Plus, we have to wonder at what point in our evolutionary history our ancestors all of a sudden went directly from emotionless, valueless machines to magically human. Well, they didn't go there. I mean, but we do know that there's a big gap between us and even chimpanzees when it comes to that kind of stuff. While I agree that teaching your kids that pacifism is not always the best option, I don't think that showing a film where pacifism does work is sending a poor message. I didn't say it was sending a poor message. I said people need to be aware of the message. All right. So the fact that I told parents that they ought to be aware doesn't mean that it's a poor message. Now, I could watch that movie with my kid and we can talk about that kind of stuff. And if you probably ought to talk about that stuff with your kids. I'm a parent and it's good. It's good to watch stories that have perspectives that are different than yours too. But as a parent, you need to be aware of that. We could use more people in the world who prefer all peaceful options before resorting to violent ones. Now, the thing about before resorting to violent ones, Ferdinand in the movie is staring down a sword in death, and he still doesn't use violence. And the matador kind of stops what he's doing just sort of out of the goodness of his heart, or because the crowd, Ferdinand wins the crowd over with pacifism, which I don't know how realistic that is in a Spanish bullfight, but maybe that's the case. The thing is, you do want kids to do peaceful options before resorting to violent options. In fact, you'd want them to be non-aggressive. You don't want them to hit people. You want them to use force only defensively. But that's totally different than the message of the movie. The message of the movie is essentially to that you are going to get what you want by not defending yourself. And whether that's good or bad, some cases you can get that. I think it worked a little bit against the British in India, but the British were a really, sort of high-minded people, and so that had an effect on them, but it probably wouldn't have had an effect on the Nazis the way Gandhi thought it would, who were executing large numbers of people, or anyone that's sufficiently hardened against human empathy. Anyway, that's my diatribe there. Often this happens because people support aggression and unfair policies in political affairs, and then when backlash occurs, they want to respond with violence without recognizing their own part in causing the events. I actually think that that's a great comment. Also, should parents not teach their kids the message of Jesus because it promotes extreme pacifism? It's one of the best aspects of the Bible. There's actually some debate with that. And you could talk about some particulars. For instance, when someone slaps you, you turn the other cheek. Another interpretation of that is that you force the Roman soldier to hit you with an open hand, which was illegal. And so that constituted an assault, whereas a backhand constituted not essentially like an assault on a non-citizen. So you could backhand a non-citizen, but you couldn't hit them with the fist. So you're forcing them to like break the law against you, which is a way that you could get back with them. Going the extra mile also would mean that you were essentially breaking the law, because they can only force you to go a mile. So there's some other interpretations of there that I thought I'd point out that are kind of interesting. But it is, the message of Jesus was a spiritual liberator and a spiritual judger, not a military liberator. And that's also an interesting and important thing to talk about. If someone doesn't know how to handle questions about meat or ethics, then they aren't a good parent. I don't know about that, but they, again, I don't like the idea of talking about meat and ethics with the animals or talking and acting like they're friends. Why should a parent avoid answering questions about ethics or cultural norms? It's that they're having to answer it in a way that the deck's stacked against them, and the child isn't able to rationalize what they're talking about. No child should be raised to ignore difficult issues and just adopt whatever practices are the norm in their culture for its own sake. I agree. If the parents disagree with an anti-meat implication in the film, they can use that opportunity to explain the aspect of the life of their child. I agree. Or if the parents find it harder to explain or justify, then they should just use this as a transformative moment to delve into issues of ethics. Yeah, it's great to talk to your kids about this stuff. What killing situations killings justify? Yeah, all that stuff's really good. Help their family adopt a well-planned vegetarian diet, including B12 supplements. The fact that you have to supplement for B12 in like a vegan diet should indicate to you some important things. I'm not going to get into it here, but you guys can talk amongst yourselves with that. If that's what the child expresses an interest in, if one doesn't deal with these matters as a parent, then their child will go through life adopting the inconsistent, hypocritical, and often immoral attitudes of the majority culture. I grew up like killing and eating animals, so it was never an issue for me. Disney's Ferdinand the Bull from 1938 was brilliant. I can barely remember it. There was no political message in any way. Ferdinand just wanted to enjoy the flowers. That was it. Not surprised they messed up with the remake. By the way, even normal bulls on a normal farm aren't gentle, nice creatures. The buggers can get pretty dangerous. Yeah, an uncastrated bull is an extremely dangerous animal, and that's just how it is, man. They get that testosterone rolling through there, and they can get pretty scary, especially if they're the horned variety, which is why nowadays you don't usually let bulls just breed cows. You collect the semen from the bull and then artificially inseminate the cows because the bulls can damage the cows. Fun fact. I lost all my interest the moment I saw the trailer. There's been a somewhat similar story with the bull Civilon and the matador El Estudiante in 1936. The bull would not attack. There were protesters in the arena, and the fight was interrupted. Unfortunately, the bull was still butchered during the outbreak of the Civil War soon thereafter. Yeah, that Civil War can make you reevaluate what is food. I'm Spanish. Bulls are not trained to be aggressive. They cannot be trained at all. It's just that their race has been selectively crossbred for centuries to get the most aggressive individuals. That's part of my understanding of it, but I'm not Spanish and I haven't attended bullfights. Also, bullfighting is a crude celebration, the torture of an animal, and this is far from being an overreaction of a snowflake millennial. Pro bullfighters admit that bulls undergo great suffering. They just justify it because that's what brave bulls are made for. It is what they're made for. I mean, that doesn't mean that that's ethically what should be happening. The bullfight isn't even a fight because it is rigged in favor of the bullfighter. And they actually talk about that in the movie, which is kind of cool. Before the event, bulls get their horns rounded, their senses blinded, their genitalia smacked, and they are fed chemicals, sulfates, and laxatives just to get them angrier and confused and prevent them from pinpointing the bullfighter, who is dressed in yellow on a yellow arena. During the event, bulls are stabbed with hooks designed to cling to their flesh and make them bleed, and then they're stabbed to death with swords. Bulls that survive the event for being weak, lazy, or declining to fight are butchered afterwards. Only the most exceptional and aggressive bulls get the pardon instead of the sword and are left alive as studs for breeding. So even within the context of bullfighting, this movie is not giving you an accurate portrayal of how you would actually get out of the bullfight as a bull. It'd be if you're extremely aggressive, then they'd let you live. That's just an interesting thing. I'm not pro bullfight at all. I don't think I'd ever go to one. Because that's just not my kind of thing. I'm okay with like slaughtering animals humanely, which means killing them quickly, and that's how I tend to do it, and that's how I've done it in the past. DreamWorks formula for movie. Here it is. Character type A really wants to be character type B, which is ironically the opposite of their nature. Examples: Megamind. Evil genius wants to be good guy. Yep. Boss baby. Helpless infant wants to be full-grown man in command. Turbo. Slow snail wants to be world's fastest racer. You can see this in Planes. The crop duster wants to be a race thing. Disgusting ogre wants to be a fairy tale healer. He actually didn't want that in Shrek. He didn't want to be a hero at all. He was forced to do it. Kung Fu Panda. Fat oaf wants to be a master fighter. Ferdinand. Fighting bull wants to be pacifist. Yeah, it's a Blue Sky movie, not DreamWorks. But it did, I think actually Disney might own Blue Sky now, which is interesting. What I fail to understand is how you imagine pacifism being a weak message. Maybe it's for you, but not for everyone, or not everyone. I appreciate Ferdinand for having the guts to showcase that. But it's not necessarily a great message for your kids if you don't want them to have that. That's why I'm talking about it. What you mean we should start lying to our kids about where real meat is coming from? Yeah, sure. Let's sugarcoat everything that's real and have kids grow up not knowing the truth. Well, the truth is cows don't talk. You state some points that are true, but I think you were too far with calling it racist. That really didn't make any sense. Why should we be so easily offended to just some jokes? I wasn't really offended. I just pointed out the fact that calling Germans effeminate panty waists is like free reign, but you couldn't do that to anyone else. So you didn't like the humor, but calling it racist, come on. And it also doesn't make sense. Like if you actually know, like where it comes from is bizarre too. It's like a really bizarre stereotype that doesn't seem to be based on reality. And no Spanish was portrayed offensive here. Ferdinand included at least Spanish people with some different skin tones. Spaniards are Europeans. They did include some different skin tones. I didn't think that was necessarily offensive, but it was, it wasn't necessarily a negative stereotype. There was this sort of like Antonio Banderas like bullfighter. Comparing Coco to Ferdinand is just wrong. Why? Fun fact: Ferdinand was animated to blend with the look of a storybook. If Blue Sky would go a more realistic approach, they could have done that without any problem. However, it was a creative decision. While Coco satisfies mostly any target audience, Ferdinand surely did satisfy its focused audience, which was what? This movie clearly didn't do anything for you, and didn't. But there's nothing wrong about that. Some people found enjoyment in it. They're allowed to. Yeah, people are allowed to not like what I like, or like what I don't like. A question: how would you describe a pacifist who will fight if there are no other options in self-defense? That's non-aggression. The bulls are definitely bred and selected for the combative spirit in bullfighting. Yep, that's my understanding. I myself dabbled in pacifism, not in Vietnam, of course. Okay, agreeing with the previous commenter, it's not racism. There's only one, the human race. Guys, it's okay to talk about, and somebody steals your TV and runs down the street. You call the police. Someone just stole my TV. It's like, what did it look like? It's like, oh boy, his skin tone was dark mocha. His hair was short and very curly. He had, it's like, well, is he black? You can just say he's black. We got to go catch him, right? Trying to tiptoe around just saying race just seems like so much. Many Americans who mispronounce words have no grounding in English grammar. Machismo is properly pronounced as machismo, not machismo. Other than that, my pedantic rate over. I've never heard anyone call it machismo. So, yeah. It's like, Oh, it's not forte, it's fort. It's like forte is an Italian word. I'm going to use use the Italian and Italian pronunciation. Great analysis. Any thoughts on Zootopia, which seemed to be an allegory for multiculturalism? I don't have time to answer that. Maybe I'll just do a video on Zootopia. I kind of liked Zootopia. I thought it had a weird message that somehow got through. It's like, I don't know. I kind of liked it. I enjoyed it. The goat is worse than Jar Jar. So it's in Rose Tico territory. He's way worse than Jar Jar. I just recently watched Jar Jar, and I think the goat was way more annoying than Jar Jar. I really thought this was a remake. Wasn't there a Disney cartoon about a bull also called Ferdinand? Yeah, okay. Drawing parallels between angry bulls and just males is going to be inevitable. Just saw the movie and thought it was average. I understand some of your criticisms here. I thought it was below average, obviously. I found the goat and some of the side characters slightly annoying as well. The message about pacifism I thought was handled decently. It wasn't that bad, but you need to be aware of it if you're going to show it to your kids and maybe be able to talk about it. I would have preferred if there had been more real consequences, but hey, what can you do? It's an animated movie targeted towards kids, so they obviously can't show much. Yeah, and then we rescued the bulls from the slaughterhouse too, so no one has to die. That's kind of very kid friendly. I enjoyed the animation wasn't bad. I thought it was average, but I'm comparing it to other things that are above average, I guess. Anti-bullfight propaganda. Not surprising. I'm Spanish and proud of the bullfighting tradition. Uh-oh. So you're okay with killing animals for entertainment? You are simplifying a big... Okay, this is really great. Is there any good reason there are so many German fags? It was a subject covered by PBS back in the 60s when it was PC. I don't know about that. Has anyone told you that you look like a certain YouTuber, TJ Kirk? I've heard that before. Amazing atheist, although hopefully I'm a little bit less ranty than him. I wonder what kids' movies today is safe to watch. They're all safe to watch if you know what's in them. Who do I recommend it for? Mexicans. Okay. The agenda is that everybody needs to be vegan. Maybe. I didn't feel like that was the agenda, necessarily. The Last Jedi seems worse to me. It preaches feminism, but completely fails. This is a good one. Since the women are actually irresponsible and incompetent in that movie. The only reason they don't fail is that they have superpowers and plot armor. This ends up deserving the feminist message, as it feels like women only want power and free pass rather than actually being heroines through moral values and self-sacrifice. Ferdinand might be an annoying preacher, but at least it's closer to actually preaching what it's intended to. Bullfighting equals animal cruelty, don't you think? Yeah. Yeah, the feminism thing, and it seems like they're doing very cross purposes by making like bad feminist characters, but as people continue to point out, it's like that's not the point. The point is to just have a woman be superior to men, and people don't know how to write a good character at all. Maybe, you know. I lost you on the slaughterhouse point. Should the kids be lied to about what they eat? You're lying to them when you say the cows talk. Like that's the manipulation, right? You're gonna have the kids have their talking guapo friend turned into meat. Like that's a weird thing to tell to little kids, you know. When I think about honest pacifism, not the strutting, self-important, belligerent claims of pacifism, they're so common these days. I think of Gandhi, whose experience with the British led him to believe that every act of aggression could be dealt with in the same way. I kind of mentioned this earlier. It's the when your only tool is a hammer, every problem is a nail situation. Yes, pacifism is a good tool, but it's not an all-purpose tool. Gandhi's assertion that the Nazis could be defeated in the same way that the Brits were pushed out of India is absurd. Brits have convinced themselves that they were civilizing and uplifting India, and so breaking the illusion that they were helping the people of India was enough to send them packing. The Nazis saw themselves as exterminating inferior people to give superior people breathing space. Those are radically different motivations. Gandhi's assertion of pacifism as a universal cure was childishly naive and narrow-minded. There's also a large group of Indian minorities that don't like Gandhi and consider him racist. Just so if you're not aware of like any of the minorities in India, there's quite a number of them. There's a caste system in India. There's minority religions like the Sikhs. I think in the Indian constitution, it declares that all Indians are Hindu, which is very offensive if you're not Hindu, right? Because you're like, I don't want something that declares me to be a Hindu. Of course, I could be wrong there. So if I'm wrong, correct me. So yeah, I agree with that. That's a great comment. You don't have idea of what you're talking about. Oh, what a great intro to a comment to begin by telling me I don't have an idea what I'm talking about. I'm not going to read the rest of that because I don't feel like stopping and thinking about the translation. If you want to show your children what pacifism accomplishes, show them Tibet. Most Tibetans are better off under Chinese government than they ever were under the Tibetan one. The name of the matador in the photo is Francisco Javier Sanchez Vara. Thank you. It's usually attributed. I don't remember who it was attributed to, but yeah, it's misattributed. So yeah, watch it in German. So I already answered this. In the English version, the horses speak with exaggerated German accents and with voices that crack effeminately. Effeminate, arrogant Germans, or all Europeans, really are an ethnic stereotype in the USA for some reason. Minutes after minutes of you basically charging against windmills. I don't know what that means. Oh, he's comparing me to Don Quixote. Well, parents ought to know about what messages are there. I'm a pacifist, but I also have common sense. If someone intends to harm me or my loved ones, I'm going to fight them. That's non-aggression. Non-aggression is our normal way that we deal with people, right? We don't just think it's okay to go up and punch someone. Okay, I'm starting to run out of time here. I'm at the 35-minute mark. All these comments are really good. Teaching your young son to be a pacifist is teaching him to get beaten up every day. Certainly it's important to learn social skills and how to avoid fights, but it's equally important to know when you should fight. Again, I'm a kind of a proponent of non-aggression. About the deer thing, a lot of people think a hunter just goes into a forest and shoots whatever he wants to eat for dinner. That's not how it works. You have to respect certain rules that change each season. Yeah, you don't shoot females in season when they're pregnant or still raising the animals. You generally don't shoot the does in general unless you're living in a state like Wisconsin where the deer are pests. And so you'll get a deer and a doe and a buck tag, and you have to kill the doe first because there's such an overpopulation of deer. Yeah, if there's too many animals, illness will spread. If there's too little, you risk to kill all of them. But you kill the buck because one male can impregnate many females. It's also always preferred to hunt weak or ill animals that aren't strong enough to live up through the winter. Yeah, that's not usually what we do. We usually go for them trophy bucks. Let's be honest. We want the biggest horns on the wall and the biggest meat to take home and eat. If a hunter violates one of these rules, they will get sued. And if they don't shoot enough animals to keep them under control, they will have to pay the farmers. They got their farms damaged by the animals. It's not easier as it seems. Most hunters love animals and understand the responsibility. I'm not sure what hunters this person's actually talking about. Maybe hunters in a different country from the United States. And if that's you and there's something with that, let me know. But we used to go hog hunting all the time because pigs are a notorious pest. The wild boars here in California, which are not a native species, by the way, they dig up grapevines. They're a real big ag pests. So you used to get kind of free reign to go hunt hogs, and you'd buy a book of 5 tags. It used to be $5. I don't know how much it is now. But farmers would want you to come on their land and shoot the hogs because they would dig up the grapevine roots and ruin sometimes very old grapevines, 50, 60-year-old grapevines, which are really, really important for winemaking. So just another little story to close it out. Are you using... Okay, I think that's pretty much it. That's most of the time that I have here. I don't have a problem with... I'll close with this one. I don't have a problem with bullfighting as long as it is a true fight to the death for both the bull and the man. No one runs to help the man if he gets gored. You let the bull kill him. As for German men being effeminate, well, that is true. I don't think so. Just look at how the German men have cucked in recent years. German men are sissy boys. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I kind of look, I don't think that's the case. So, and I think German politics, there's more going on than just bringing in lots of migrants. There's definitely some resistance to that. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. I do have books you can buy. This is a nice long video and appreciate you listening to me ramble and answer comments. So hopefully yours got answered. You can get the Needle Ash books right now. They are right now, if you're doing the ebook, this one's free. On Amazon, and these two are $1 and $1.99 each, and so you can get them. This one will they might eventually all go up on Kindle Unlimited, so if you have that, you can read them all for free. But you can get number 2 for free, at least, by being on my mailing list. And if you really want number 3 and you don't have $2, I'll give you a copy. And I don't mind giving away copies right now because I'm kind of in the early stages of setting up this sort of funnel that are these 3 books. They're short, but they're fun, and it's good military fantasy with knights and battle, and there's also fun magic and stuff like that. So I'll see you guys next time, and have a good one.